Hi, welcome back to the workshop for episode 11 of the ES335 build, and in this episode we're going to start work on getting the body put together by making some kerf linings. So we're slowly but surely working towards the point where we can get the top and the back glued onto the guitar, but there's a few things we need to do before we can do that. The first of them is to create this detail that's running more or less the whole way around the guitar. Most of you already understand what it is, but for those who don't, it's called kerfing, and it's a thin strip of wood with saw cuts or kerfs cut at a regular pattern so that it'll bend around the shape of the guitar. And the reason it's there is to just give a load more gluing area for when we glue the top and the back on. So if you think our ribs are 3mm thick, there's absolutely no way on earth that you're going to get a solid lasting bond with that thickness of material. It simply won't be strong enough. So the kerfing is there to add some more material to glue onto. So in this instance, the rib is about 3mm, and this kerfing, well, I'm going to cut mine to 6mm, quarter of an inch. So in total, that's going to give us a 9mm gluing surface, which is 3 times what we would have had with just the rib. Now I'm going to be using mahogany for this, no other reason than I've got some mahogany I can cut up into strips. There might be an argument to say that because the rest of the body is all maple, if I used maple for the kerfing, it might be a little bit on the bright side. I'm not sure that this volume of material will make that much difference, but who knows, could be a thing. So I've milled up 3 lengths of mahogany to do this with. They're the right thickness, they're the right width, about 1.5 meters long, so there's way more than I need here, but I'm pretty sure it'll come in anyway. And what I've got to do now is cut a series of saw cuts through here, going pretty much all of the way through, but not quite. I need it to be held together, but I also need it to be flexible, so it will go around these radiuses. There's no hard and fast rules on how you cut these. I mean, you could use a handsaw. This one's got a depth stop on, so we could set the depth stop up to what we need and go along and cut these kerfs in by hand if you've got the odd ear to spare. I don't, so I'm going to have to automate it somewhat and speed it up. So to speed this job up, I've created this, and I'm going to call it the Kerfalux 2000. And basically what this is a jig that will sit on my bandsaw, and it will enable me to both cut to the right depth and also with the right spacing. You probably can't see it, but we'll go through this in a minute. There's a little metal stop on there for locating the kerf onto. So I'll run you through how I made this and what it does, and then we can get on with cutting this kerfing. Okay, so what I've just done there is I've cut one slot, which is where the blade of the bandsaw is going to run, and I've cut a slightly longer and wider slot there, and that's where this little, it's actually 2 pieces of metal glued together, are going to sit. And what I've done is I've cut it in such a way that when it goes in one way, the little piece of metal that sticks out will be just over 6mm away from the saw blade. But I want to cut 2 different types of kerfing. I want one that's about 6mm, and I want one that's slightly closer together, maybe like 1mm closer. And I want that stuff that's closer together for when I do the really tight curves around the body. So I can use that setting to cut the bulk of the kerfing, but then when I want that tighter radius kerfing, I just flip it round and that stop moves a millimetre closer to the blade. So the Kerfed 2000 is actually cleverer than it looks. Okay, and then to set this up, it's fairly straightforward really. I'm just going to put the blade into the slot. I've actually made a little bit of kerfing through trial and error that I know is cut deep enough to work. So I'm going to just simply use that to set it in position. And clamp the board down. And with that in place, I can then insert the metal stop and we can give it a try out. Okay, so that's all the kerfing run through the bandsaw. It gets very uncontrollable once you've kind of got a length of it going. So I've kind of deliberately broken it down into smaller pieces. It just makes it more manageable. But the whole time I was doing this, I just had one of those feelings that something wasn't right. And I couldn't put my finger on it. But it occurred to me half the way through that I said I've made this 18mm wide. Now I'm no Alan Turing, but I do know that 2 times 18 is more than 33, which is the thickness we've got for the side ribs. So I've obviously mismeasured this off the drawing. In fact, it should be closer to like 12mm rather than 18. So what I'm going to do is just run this quickly through the bandsaw, get it thinned down to the right width. And then the final job we've got to do is we just need to chamfer off one edge of it. So it'll be square on the top and chamfered at the bottom. So I'm just going to set the bandsaw up and get all that whizzed through. Okay, so the next process we've got to go through is actually to put a chamfer onto the bottom edge of this. It needs to be square at the top edge, but we need to chamfer it away at the bottom edge. So back to the bandsaw. Okay, so I've set the bandsaw up with an appropriate angle on the table, just a little make-do fence. Because my fence is too big, I couldn't get the blade close enough to it at that angle. And I've also made a quick feather stick just to hold them in position against the blade as I run through. So without further ado, we'll get these cut down. Okay, so I had a question in the comments of the last video that made me think that perhaps I hadn't explained myself as well as I could have done on a particular element of this, and it was this cutout in the centre block. So I went to great lengths to explain why this wasn't in the right position for me, and I moved it back to be in line with the bridge pickup. But the reason we want this cutout in the first place is actually to get the controls, so the pots, the output jack and the switch, into this cavity. This is viewed from the back, so it probably looks back to front from your perspective, but this is the lower cavity. And if we have this cutout in line with the pickup route, we can pass the pots and everything through that into here and then fish them through the control holes in the normal way. The other way of doing it is through the F holes on the front. The problem I've encountered in the past is that sometimes those F holes aren't physically big enough to get a full-size potentiometer through. So like a full-size CTS pot, which is what I prefer to use. I don't think that's the case on this particular build because the F holes on a 335 are quite big. But I just think it is generally easier if you come in through the pickup route. So that's the reason that I moved that cutout back to where I did. So hopefully that's cleared that up for everyone and we can get back on with the kerfing. Okay, so there's all my kerfing cut and shaped. It might not seem like we've got a lot of material left from what we started off with, but I think 4 of these longer bits is probably enough to do the vast majority of the build. So I've got loads, I've got way more than I need. So that's brilliant. So that's ready to be glued on, but of course we're going to have to clamp it somehow. Now I've seen Gibson clamp this stuff on with like multiple bulldog clips. I don't have that, and I'm not going to spend a load of money buying them just for this one job. But what we can use are the humble clothes peg. But these on their own probably aren't strong enough to hold it in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take an elastic band and I'm going to wrap that round multiple times, and that actually massively increases the spring pressure on them. So I've got 100 of those to do. So I'm going to put some music on and I'll join you back in a minute. Okay, so there's all my clamps sorted out and I've got all my kerfing cut, so we're almost ready to get this glued on. But I just want to do a little bit more cleaning up work to the inside faces of the ribs before I attempt to glue this on. So I'm going to leave this till next time. So as always, like, subscribe, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.